Have you ever encountered a neighbor so insufferable that they called 911 to have you removed, blissfully unaware that you were the new police chief? Picture this: you're simply moving into your new home, minding your own business, when the neighborhood HOA Karen decides to flex her imaginary authority muscles. This is the story of one such Karen who thought she ruled her suburban kingdom, only to discover that the quiet new resident she was harassing had just taken the reins of the entire police department. What started as a typical entitled neighbor situation quickly spiraled into comedy gold when reality crashed into Karen's inflated ego. Our protagonist, who we'll call Officer Smith, had just accepted the position of police chief in a small town, eager to start fresh in a peaceful community. Little did he know that his first official encounter would come not from a crime scene, but from his own driveway. Enter the HOA Karen, a self-appointed neighborhood watchdog with a chip on her shoulder and a rulebook she wielded like a sword. Known for her zero-tolerance policy on parking infractions and her tendency to call emergency services over the most trivial matters, she had made herself the unofficial terror of the suburban streets. Officer Smith had been looking forward to a peaceful afternoon unpacking boxes in his new home, a modest two-story house on Maple Avenue that came with a manicured lawn and a view of the neighborhood park. He had parked his personal vehicle, a silver Honda Civic, slightly overlapping into the street while he carried in several heavy boxes containing his police memorabilia and personal effects. The move had been exhausting, and he figured a few minutes of temporary parking wouldn't hurt anyone in this quiet suburban enclave. That's when she appeared, marching down the sidewalk like a general inspecting her troops. Margaret Stevens, the self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics and HOA president, had spotted the automotive transgression from her living room window. Her perfectly coiffed gray hair barely moved as she stormed toward the offending vehicle, her arms swinging with purpose. Smith noticed her approach and set down his box, preparing to politely explain the situation. "Excuse me," Karen's voice cut through the afternoon air like nails on a chalkboard, "but that vehicle is in violation of HOA Code 3.7.2 subsection B. No vehicles are permitted to impede traffic flow on residential streets." She brandished a laminated copy of the HOA rules as if it were a legal document with the authority of the Supreme Court. Smith smiled diplomatically. "I'm terribly sorry about that. I'm just moving in and will have it moved in just a moment." "I was carrying some heavy boxes and I don't care about your excuses," Karen interrupted, her face reddening with what seemed like rehearsed indignation. "Rules are rules, and everyone must follow them equally. I've seen people like you before, thinking they can do whatever they want. Well, not in my neighborhood." The condescending tone wasn't lost on Smith, who had dealt with difficult individuals throughout his career. He maintained his composure, knowing that escalating the situation would serve no one. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, and I respect the neighborhood rules. Give me 2 minutes to move my car, and we can avoid any further issues." But Karen was on a roll now, fueled by the perceived challenge to her authority. 2 minutes? 2 minutes? You've already been blocking the street for at least 15 minutes. I've been timing it. She waved her phone in his face. "And don't think that innocent act works on me. I know your type, you move in and think you own the place. Well, newsflash, buddy, I run this neighborhood, and what I say goes." Smith's patience was wearing thin, but his training kicked in. He recognized the classic signs of someone who thrived on confrontation and felt empowered by their perceived position. He had seen it countless times in his 20 years of law enforcement, civilians who derived their self-worth from asserting control over others in small, petty ways. "Look, Mrs.," he ventured, trying to establish some human connection. "Stevens. Margaret Stevens. HOA president, neighborhood watch captain, and head of the beautification committee," she rattled off her titles like military ranks. "And I'm telling you right now that if you don't move that car in 30 seconds, I'm calling the police." This was the moment Smith could have easily revealed his identity and avoided the entire upcoming circus. But something in Karen's aggressive demeanor made him curious about how far she would take this power trip. He had always been interested in human behavior, and this presented an interesting case study in suburban tyranny. I understand your position, Mrs. Stevens. But calling the police over a car that's been parked for a few minutes while someone is actively moving might be considered a waste of police resources. Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you threatening me? Did you just threaten a member of the HOA board? Her voice rose to a pitch that attracted the attention of several neighbors. This is assault. This is intimidation. I'm absolutely calling 911 right now. True to her word, Karen dramatically pulled out her phone and dialed the emergency number. Smith watched with a mixture of amusement and concern as she launched into her performance. Yes, 911? I need police assistance immediately at 1247 Maple Avenue. There's a dangerous individual in our neighborhood who's refusing to follow HOA regulations and has just threatened me. Yes, threatened. He's very aggressive and, what? No, he hasn't touched me, but his tone was very menacing. He's blocking traffic and creating a public disturbance. We need someone here right away. As she hung up, Karen turned to Smith with a triumphant sneer. The police will be here any minute, and then we'll see how tough you are. I hope you've learned your lesson about respecting authority in this neighborhood. Smith simply nodded, hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed stance that he'd perfected over years of patrol work. He watched as Karen began addressing the small crowd that had gathered, clearly relishing her moment in the spotlight. Everyone, please stay back. This individual has been causing trouble since the moment he arrived. He refuses to follow basic neighborhood rules and has threatened me when I tried to enforce them. This is exactly why we need strict HOA guidelines, to keep troublemakers like this out of our community. The arriving crowd consisted of the Johnsons from next door, an elderly couple who spent their afternoons tending to their prize-winning roses, young Jennifer from across the street, still in her medical scrubs from her shift, and the Martinez family, who had paused their evening walk to see what the commotion was about. Within minutes, a police cruiser rounded the corner, its presence lending gravity to Karen's theatrical production. She straightened her posture and prepared for her vindication, unaware that the universe was about to deliver one of life's most poetic lessons in humility. Part 3, the climax and resolution. The police cruiser pulled up to the curb, its engine purring to a gentle stop. Officer Jackson stepped out first, followed by his partner, Officer Rodriguez. Both officers had been briefed on the call during their drive, something about a disruptive individual refusing to comply with HOA rules. What they hadn't been expecting was to see their new boss standing calmly on the sidewalk with his hands behind his back, surrounded by a small crowd and one very agitated woman. Officer Jackson's eyes widened in recognition, but before he could speak, Karen rushed forward, practically bouncing on her toes with anticipation. Thank goodness you're here. This man, she pointed dramatically at Smith, has been blocking traffic for hours, refused to follow HOA regulations, and threatened me when I tried to enforce the rules. He's clearly a menace to our peaceful community. Officer Jackson glanced at his partner, who was equally trying to mask his surprise. They both knew they were looking at Chief Smith, their new commanding officer, but the situation was so absurd that neither wanted to interrupt what was clearly becoming an epic moment of karmic justice. Ma'am, Officer Jackson began, his voice carefully neutral, could you describe the nature of these threats? Karen's face flushed with renewed indignation. He said that calling the police was a waste of resources. Can you believe the audacity? And look at that car. It's been in violation of Section 3.7.2 subsection B for at least 30 minutes now. I demand you arrest him immediately. The two officers exchanged another glance, this time with barely concealed amusement. Chief Smith remained silent, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth the only indication that he was finding this situation as entertaining as they were. Sir, Officer Rodriguez addressed Smith, playing along with the charade, is this your vehicle? Yes, it is, Smith replied calmly. I was moving some boxes into my new home and paused here temporarily. I offered to move it immediately, but Mrs. Stevens preferred to call 911. New home? Officer Jackson asked, feigning ignorance. And where might that be? Right here at 1247 Maple Avenue, Smith gestured to the house behind him. I just moved in today. Karen practically exploded. I don't care if you just moved in or if you've lived here for 100 years. Rules are rules, and you can't just. She suddenly stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of color as recognition began to dawn. Officer Jackson had finally decided to end the performance. He straightened to attention and offered a crisp salute. Chief Smith, I apologize for not recognizing you immediately. How are you settling into the neighborhood, sir? The words hung in the air like a detonation. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times, producing no sound. Her perfectly manicured hands began to tremble slightly, and her eyes darted between the officers and Smith, trying to process what she had just heard. Chief, she finally managed to squeak. As in, police chief? Smith turned to face her fully for the first time, his expression professional but with a hint of warmth. That's correct, Mrs. Stevens. I was appointed last month and officially started this week. I moved here because I wanted to live in the community I serve. The transformation in Karen's demeanor was instantaneous and almost comical to watch. Her rigid posture crumpled, and a forced smile appeared on her face, though her eyes remained wide with shock and horror. The gathered neighbors began to whisper among themselves, some chuckling quietly at the turn of events. I had no idea, Karen stammered, her voice now several octaves higher than before. If I had known, of course, I would never have. This is all just a big misunderstanding. You see, we take our neighborhood very seriously, and we're always looking out for. I mean, we're so grateful to have law enforcement living among us. Smith held up a hand gently, stopping her increasingly desperate rambling. Mrs. Stevens, I understand your dedication to maintaining neighborhood standards. However, I must address a few concerns about today's incident. Karen nodded eagerly, like a student about to receive an important lesson. The crowd had grown, with more neighbors drawn by the unfolding drama. Some had their phones out, clearly recording what had become the most entertaining event in their quiet suburb in years. First, Smith continued, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had served him well throughout his career. Calling 911 for non-emergency situations ties up valuable resources that could be needed for actual emergencies. While I appreciate your commitment to neighborhood rules, a temporarily parked car during a move does not constitute an emergency. Of course, you're absolutely right, Karen agreed quickly, nodding so vigorously her perfectly set hair finally showed some movement. I was just concerned about traffic flow and... Second, Smith interrupted gently but firmly, there was no threat made today. I simply suggested that police resources might be better used elsewhere. The distinction is important, as falsely reporting threats can have serious legal implications. The color drained from Karen's face again as she realized the potential consequences of her dramatic phone call. Several neighbors, who had witnessed her previous encounters with other residents, were now looking at her with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. This was clearly not the first time Karen had called law enforcement for trivial matters. Finally, Smith concluded, while I respect your position in the HOA, I hope we can establish a more neighborly relationship going forward. I believe in community policing, which means working together to make our neighborhood a better place for everyone. The gathered crowd began to disperse, some offering congratulations to their new police chief neighbor, others shooting disapproving looks at Karen. The Johnson couple approached Smith with warm smiles, welcoming him to the neighborhood and apologizing for the unpleasant introduction. Jennifer, still in her medical scrubs, mentioned that it was refreshing to have someone in law enforcement who valued community cooperation. Karen, meanwhile, stood frozen in place, the full weight of her actions finally settling upon her. She had spent years cultivating an image of authority and respect in the neighborhood, and in one afternoon, she had managed to embarrass herself in front of everyone she had tried to impress or intimidate. I should probably get back to my duties, she finally mumbled, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. Welcome to the neighborhood, Chief Smith. I'm sure you'll find we're usually much more welcoming. As she turned to leave, Smith called after her gently. Mrs. Stevens? I meant what I said about working together. If you ever have legitimate concerns about neighborhood safety, please don't hesitate to contact me. Just perhaps through the non-emergency line next time. The story of the HOA Karen who called the cops on the police chief spread through social media like wildfire. The Reddit post racked up thousands of upvotes, with commenters sharing their own tales of entitled neighbors and karma coming full circle. Many praised Smith's professional handling of the situation, while others suggested that Karen had finally met her match. In the weeks that followed, the dynamic in the neighborhood shifted subtly. Karen's reign of terror had been definitively ended, though Smith made a point of being cordial when their paths crossed. The other residents, emboldened by seeing their longtime nemesis humbled, began to push back against some of the more ridiculous HOA rules. And Smith? He became known not just as the police chief, but as the man who brought peace to Maple Avenue in the most entertaining way possible. The incident served as a perfect reminder that assumptions can be dangerous, authority comes in many forms, and sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about delivering life lessons. Karen never quite recovered her former swagger, and Smith's reputation as a fair, approachable leader was cemented from day one of his residency. It was, as one Redditor commented, the most beautiful instance of instant karma you could hope to see.